I'm going to show you an easy, simple and fast way to create buttons in Figma. Not only will I show you how to create buttons in Figma, I'll also show you how to create different button interaction states. And I'll even go a little further and show you how to make these buttons interactive and display them in a Figma prototype. So without wasting any more of your valuable time, let's dive in. We're in Figma here, and I've just created this list just to give you sort of a clear sense of what we're doing. So first we're going to create the button with auto layout, and then we are going to create a component from that layout, and then we're going to create some variants, and these variants would be like a default button, a hover state and a press state. And then we're going to create the button interactions out of those variants, and I'm going to show you how to implement that button in a design. Right, let's create our button text. So I'm just going to say click here, and I'm happy with the font size and also the font weight, and I'm going to add the auto layout now. So I'm going to right click on the text, and I'm going to choose the add auto layout option in the right click menu. You can also use a shortcut, which is Shift A. Now watch what happens when I select add auto layout. You can see the text box has actually enlarged, but actually it hasn't enlarged. It's actually still the same here. However, it's just added a frame around the text box. And what I'm going to do is just name this frame, and you can see here in the layers palette, you'll notice that there's the frame and there's the text box within the frame. I'm going to rename this to button, since it's very good practice to name your layers. And what I want to show you next is just what you would see in the parameters palette, or the options palette, where you get all the options and parameters of your components and objects inside Figma. So you'll notice that there is an auto layout section here where you can adjust the horizontal padding and the vertical padding. And I'm going to quickly show you how that works. So let's say I want to add some padding on the left and the right hand side of the button. I'm going to adjust this to, let's say, 40 pixels, and you can see how that has changed. Now, I don't want that much padding, so I'm going to change it to about 16, and then the horizontal padding, I'm going to change that to 16 as well. And here you can see the sections that are highlighting in blue. That is the padding in the button. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create a component. And the way we do that is you'll see that there's an option over here that says create component. You'll see when I have nothing selected, that option disappears because there's nothing to create a component from. If I select button here, you can see that that option is back. And I'm going to click that. Now watch what happens when I click it. You'll see that the frame here turns to purple, and there's a little icon that appears here that indicates that this auto layout, or this object in Figma, is now a component. And what we want to do is we want to add some styling to this component. So you can go and say, well, let's go to the fill here. Let's give it a color, let's say like a nice hot pink or electric pink, and I think that's good. Let's also add a corner radius here of about 8. So that looks pretty good. So we actually have a nice functioning button here, except we just don't have those interaction states yet. Now, to add those interaction states, we need to create something called variants. Now, to create a variant, you would select the button, and then you'll see the option here appear. So once again, if nothing is selected, the option isn't there. If you select the button, or in this case, the component, you have the add variant option here. So I'm going to select that, and watch what happens. Boom. So this is a way that Figma indicates that a component is now within a variant. You have these dotted lines here, and that just indicates for us that this is now within a variant configuration. Now, I want 3 states in my button. So I'm going to click on this object here. I'm going to click on the plus button here. And now we actually have 3 states. So remember, we want a hover or a default and a hover and a press state. And I'm just putting this text here just for demonstration purposes. So this is quite important, the next step that we're going to do now. And we need to go and name these variants, right? So if I select this variant here, you can see there's like properties here in this panel, and you need to go and actually name these buttons appropriately so that it's just really good practice, and it's going to make a whole lot of sense in just a moment. So what we'll do is the first one here, we're going to say that's our default state, right? So we actually have default in here. I'm going to say state equals default. And this one here, I'm going to say state, my spelling is atrocious, but okay, state equals hover. And this one here, I'm going to say state equals pressed. All right, now let's look at our list. What are we doing now? So we've created the component and we have created the variants. And now let's go and add those button interactions. All right. So firstly, we need to go and put Figma into prototype mode, and you will do that by selecting prototype here. Then you would select the button, and what you would notice is on the edges here, you have these little plus buttons that open up when you hover over it. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click and drag it to the hover state. And what you'll notice, you have some options here in this box that pops up. And I'm going to say, while hovering, change that button to this state. So change it to the hover state. And you have some options here. You can make it instant so that that button changes state instantly, or maybe dissolve, where there's a nice smooth animation that you can add to it. So I'm going to make it about 300 milliseconds. That's a nice smooth transition into the hover state. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this arrow here to the pressed state. And here I would say, while pressing, basically keep the same options here. I would also say just decrease the animation duration there to 100 milliseconds, because that needs to be a little bit of a quicker action. And there we go. So now we actually have the states. And there's one more thing that I want to do actually. So when you are on the press state, you actually want the button to go back to the default state when your mouse moves away from it. So I'm going to pull an arrow back there, and we're going to say when the mouse leaves the press state, we want it to go back to the default state here, and let's leave it at 100 milliseconds, that animation duration. Okay, great. So now we actually have the states defined, but there's one other important thing that we need to do. We need to create the styling for the hover state so that visually you can see that it changes. So I'm just going to change the color of this button. Let's make it maybe a little darker like that. Whoops, here we go. And the click state is also going to look a little different, and let's make it something like that. So this is just for demonstration purpose. This is not necessarily how I would do it in a real design project, but I think it works for now. So here's the next step that we need to do. We actually need to go and test it out on a design and see if it works. And I've created this sample mock-up here. And what we'll do is we'll take the button and we'll select Option, and I think it might be Alt on Windows, and just drag it here onto our design. And you also notice that you can drag this button out and you'll see the text stay centered, which is great. So already the button's got like responsiveness built into it. Now let's go and see what happens when we play the prototype and let's see if our design works. If it doesn't work, we'll just come back and change things again. Okay, so let's see. When we hover over it, there's the hover state, and when we click, there's the click state or the pressed state. And when our mouse leaves the button, then it goes back to the default state. So there you have it. That is a quick and easy way to create a button in Figma. The other cool thing that I wanted to show about having components and variants is that you can have multiple buttons, and you can go and change the state if you wanted to. So here in the options palette here, you can go and change that to hover or pressed, just to indicate some kind of state that you wanted to. Also, what's really cool is if I go back to my buttons here, let me just zoom in appropriately here. You can see my brand color here is this orange color. So if I wanted to make sure that my button is the right color, I can go and just select the color here. And you'll notice that the colors changed all over the place. Wherever that button is, that is a really handy feature. Just imagine you have 100 screens and there are like 100 buttons on those screens and you have to go and change them all individually. This way you can change it in one place and the button changes wherever it's present on the other screens. So that is it. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'm looking forward to seeing you again.